In the quiet cold of interstellar space, where the light of dying suns painted the void in melancholy hues, two civilizations drifted toward a destiny neither had foreseen. Humanity, bold and young, and the Aelthar, ancient and fractured. For centuries, the Aelthar had ruled this arm of the galaxy, a species of crystalline skin and eyes that shimmered like fractured light. They were not one people anymore. What had once been a single, proud civilization had split into two warring ideologies. The Vile Dominion believed strength was law, that young races should be conquered and guided through submission. But the Saren coalition believed otherwise. They had watched humanity rise from its cradle, marveled at the ferocity of their progress, the defiance in their art, and the hope that clung to their every act of survival. When the first human explorers reached the outer colonies of Aelthar space, it was the Saren who greeted them. They came not with weapons but light, an envoy of crystalline ships that shimmered like rainbows against black. The first meeting took place in orbit of a barren world, one half lit by a dying sun, the other buried in shadow. Humanity sent Captain Mara Terran of the UNS Solstice, a veteran of the asteroid wars, cautious but open. The Sarens sent Elder Karuan, their council leader, a being of towering grace whose voice resonated not in sound but in harmonic pulses through the comms array. That meeting changed everything. In the months that followed, treaties were written, language exchanged, and cultural bridges built. Humanity found in the Saren something it had never known before, a mirror that reflected what it could be at its best, determined, curious, compassionate. The Saren found in humans what they themselves had long forgotten, the strength to hope in chaos. But far away, in the red systems of the Vale Dominion, hatred brewed like thunder. To them, humanity was a stain, an infestation of chaos and defiance. The Dominion's warlord, Zarth Vrain, declared that the creature of flesh must not be allowed to expand further. He saw the alliance of Saren and humans as betrayal, an abomination of tradition. The first strike came swift. Without warning, the skies over the human colony of Vega Prime ignited in green fire. Veiled warships, spiked and shimmering with dark energy, descended upon the settlements. Cities burned under particle bombardments. The human defenses fell one after another, outmatched by the Veil's ancient technology. But before total annihilation, a fleet of shimmering crystal ships tore through hyperspace. Saren reinforcements. Elder Karun himself commanded them, breaking every tenet of non-intervention his council held dear. "If we stand idle while the Dominion devours innocence," he said, "then we are complicit in the death of light." The Battle of Vega Prime became legend. Saren ships danced like shards of glass in a storm, each movement fluid, deliberate, and almost mournful. Human cruisers, heavy and scarred, fought beside them, smaller, cruder, but brimming with unrelenting will. Together, they repelled the first wave of the Veil. For the first time in millennia, the Aelthar fought one another not for empire, but for morality. When the smoke cleared, half of Vega Prime was gone. Millions were dead. Yet something had changed in the ashes. Humanity and the Saren had forged something deeper than alliance, a covenant. In the following years, both species built together. Saren engineers taught humans how to weave energy into light-form alloys. Human tacticians showed the Saren the art of unpredictability in warfare. They shared music, memory, and grief, but the Dominion was not finished. From the veiled systems came whispers, massive fleets assembling, worlds enslaved, and entire Saren colonies raised for siding with humanity. A new warlord had risen under Zarth Vrain, his daughter Valen, a commander with the cruelty of fire and the brilliance of stars. She promised to erase both Saren and human kindred from existence. The Covenant War had begun. As fleets gathered across the void, humanity's young admiral, Rion Holt, stood on the bridge of the Solstice II. Once a captain under Mara Terran, he had seen Vega Prime's destruction as a child, and sworn never again to stand powerless before monsters. The Saren had become his allies, his mentors, his friends. Now he would lead them into the greatest battle the stars had ever known. The Saren War Council gathered above the ringed world of Elinar, their last sanctuary. Elder Karuan stood beside Admiral Holt, his crystalline form cracked and dim from years of conflict. "The Dominion grows stronger," Karuan said, his voice resonating through the chamber. "They feed on fear, their ships number in the thousands now. If we do not strike soon, they will swallow us whole." Holt nodded, eyes hard. "Then we hit first. Humanity has fought impossible wars before. You taught us how to fight with light. Now we'll show you how to fight with fire." Outside the chamber, fleets readied, crystal and steel, human and alien. Bound by a promise written in the ashes of Vega Prime, the stars would soon burn again. The fleet shimmered like a constellation reborn. Hundreds of vessels, human and Saren alike, drifting in perfect formation above the blue storms of Elinar. Some ships bore the silver crescents of the Saren, others the deep navy banners of the United Earth Directorate. Together, they formed what the galaxy had not seen in an age, unity across species. Every surface of the Solstice II thrummed with life. Technicians hurried through glowing corridors, their reflections warped in crystalline panels gifted by Saren engineers. On the command deck, Admiral Rian Holt stood before the great viewport, staring at the war-torn stars ahead. He could feel it, the calm before something vast, inevitable, and terrible. Beside him stood Elder Karuan. Though the ancient Saren's form still radiated dignity, there were fractures spreading through his crystalline chest, faint glowing fissures that pulsed like fading embers. Every battle cost him a part of his being. The Saren lived long, but war eroded their energy cores. Still, he remained unbowed. "The Dominion watches from the veiled rim," Karuan murmured, voice resonating through the air like a low chord. "They gather their strength, there in the shadow of the dying star. We strike first, or we wait to be consumed." Holt nodded slowly. "Then we'll strike. Humanity doesn't wait to die." The Council of War convened, half human, half Saren. They stood around a great, hololithic table projecting the Dominion's vast territory. Blood-red lines across the map. Worlds marked with symbols of enslavement and ruin. The plan was simple in theory, impossible in execution. Strike the heart. Their target was Carthion Prime, the Dominion's war foundry world. If they could cripple its forges, they might stall the enemy's fleet production long enough to force peace talks. But the world was ringed with defense moons and guarded by the Valen's armada. "The risk is total annihilation," said Commander Ren Vashti, Holt's second. "If their warp interceptors cut our retreat lanes, then we'll make sure there's no retreat," Holt interrupted. "If we run, they'll chase us to Earth. If we stand, maybe we teach them to fear again." Silence followed. Even the Saren delegates looked uneasy. Humans had a way of embracing doom with unnerving resolve. Karuan tilted his head, facets catching the light. "You speak like your predecessors. Reckless, but righteous. I once feared that fire. Now I find it contagious." Within hours, the Covenant fleet departed Elinar. Hundreds of drives flared blue-white across the dark, vanishing into hyperspace. The Dominion world of Carthion Prime was a monument to cruelty. The surface burned endlessly, molten rivers feeding towering forges that cast green fire into the sky. Massive spire cities reached into the clouds, each one a factory of war. And above it all, the vile armada drifted like predators. Obsidian ships shaped like wings of razors. At their center stood the Harbinger, flagship of Warlord Valen. Sleek and terrifying, it carried the Dominion's new energy cannon, a weapon that could rip through planetary shields in seconds. Valen herself stood at the observation spire, her armor a living metal that pulsed with venomous light. She was beautiful in the way storms were, cold, magnificent, and merciless. "Report," she commanded. Her second in command, an older Vial named Dracos, bowed low. "Scouts report a combined human-Saren fleet entering our sector. They come for Carthion." Valen's lips curled into something almost like amusement. "So they finally bring the child to the storm. Good. I have waited to crush their alliance. She turned her gaze toward the horizon where the green furnaces belched smoke into space. Ready the Harbinger. Admiral, Vashti said softly. What are your orders? Holt looked up. His eyes were cold, unyielding. We finish what he started. He turned toward the fleet projection. Every ship follow my lead. For Vega Prime, for Elinar, for Karun. The cry spread through every channel. Human, Saren, and even captured Veil defectors who had chosen peace. And together they charged the Harbinger. The assault on the Harbinger was madness. Even Holt knew it as the order left his lips. But madness, he thought, was sometimes the only weapon humanity had left. Through the shattered remnants of the Saren flagship's radiant debris, the Solstice II surged ahead, its hull scarred, engines screaming, shields flickering in bursts of dying blue. Behind it came what remained of the Allied fleet, a ragged formation of ships burning and bleeding light across the void. The Harbinger loomed before them like a mountain of obsidian, its surface alive with crawling lines of green fire. Targeting locks failing, shouted Commander Vashti. Push us in closer, Holt ordered. We're boarding that ship. Vashti turned to him, disbelief in her eyes. Sir, that's suicide. So was Vega Prime, so was every fight we ever won. A beat of silence passed. Then she nodded grimly. Aye, Admiral. The Solstice II roared toward the Dominion flagship, its railguns tearing through enemy escorts. At the same time, smaller human and Saren corvettes cut a swath through the chaos, clearing a narrow path. When the ship came within 1,000 kilometers, Holt gave the order. All boarding wings, launch. Hundreds of drop pods streaked through the darkness, their thrusters burning bright. Inside each, human marines and Saren warriors braced themselves. One heartbeat from eternity. The pods struck the Harbinger's hull like meteors, cutting through the black armor with fusion cutters. Hatches blew open, and chaos was unleashed. Inside the Dominion flagship, the corridors were a labyrinth of alien steel, black and veined with pulsing light. The air shimmered with heat and energy discharge. Holt led the first strike team himself, his rifle held tight against his chest. Around him moved his soldiers, armored and silent, accompanied by Saren fighters whose crystalline blades hummed with resonance. Cut through to the core deck, Holt ordered through the comms. We end this from the inside. Behind them, let them come. I will face their leader myself. Holt's team burst through a final blast door into the main chamber, a vast cathedral of alien machinery. At its center rose a tower of black crystal, the Harbinger's power core. Energy pulsed upward in slow rhythmic surges, like the heartbeat of a god. Vashti checked her scanner. This is it. If we can overload that core, the entire ship goes critical. Then we'll give Karun a funeral the stars will remember, Holt said quietly. They spread out, planting demolition charges along the base of the core. Each device glowed a soft amber as it armed. The hum of power deepened. The Harbinger seemed to sense their intrusion. Then the floor trembled. A shockwave tore through the chamber, flinging soldiers aside. From the smoke emerged Valen, tall and armored in gleaming black. The energy of the ship flowed through her like lightning, her eyes burning emerald fire. So this is the human who defies the Dominion, she said, voice echoing through the chamber. You should have stayed on your dying world. Holt raised his rifle. We're not the dying kind. Valen moved like a storm. Energy blades erupted from her gauntlets and she struck with terrifying speed. The first blow shattered Holt's rifle, the second nearly split him in two, but he rolled aside, drawing his sidearm. He fired 3 shots. 2 glanced off her armor. The third struck her shoulder, sending shards of living metal flying. You bleed, he said. Good, Valen snarled, slashing her arm in a wide arc that sent Holt crashing against a console. Pain tore through him. Before she could finish him, a Saren warrior leapt between them, a towering figure clad in fractured crystal armor. It was Karun's successor, his apprentice Saren Laura, who had survived the destruction of the Luminara. Her blade met Valen's in a cascade of light. You are a disgrace to our kind, Elora hissed, and you are a fool who sides with decay, Valen replied, striking harder. The two alien women fought like mirrored storms, light and shadow clashing in endless rhythm. The chamber shook with each impact. Holt crawled toward the core, bleeding but alive. He reached for the detonator. "Vashti, we're out of time." "Charges set," Vashti's voice crackled. "You light it, we all go." Holt looked up. Elora screamed as Valen's blade pierced her chest. The Saren staggered, light dimming in her crystalline form. "No," Holt whispered. He raised the detonator, thumb hovering over the trigger. Valen turned, impaled Elora's blade through her side to free herself, and stepped toward him. "You'll die for nothing, human." "Maybe," Holt said, "but so will you." He pressed the trigger. The world exploded. The Harbinger's core ruptured like a dying sun. The shockwave ripped through the ship, tearing decks apart, sending molten fragments into space. Allied vessels fled the blast radius as the Dominion flagship disintegrated in a blaze of emerald and white. For a moment, the stars themselves seemed to hold their breath. When the light faded, nothing remained of the Harbinger but drifting shards. Hours later, aboard the battered Solstice II, survivors gathered in the dimly lit medbay. Holt lay on a stretcher, bandaged, half-conscious. Vashti stood over him, silent until his eyes opened. "Did we get her?" he asked, voice hoarse. Vashti nodded slowly. "The Harbinger is gone. Valen's flagship. Destroyed." Holt exhaled, eyes closing. "Then maybe we finally won one." She smiled faintly. "The Dominion fleet is in chaos. The Saren ships are sweeping up the survivors. We might have actually done it." Outside the viewport, the wreckage of battle drifted. Human hulls, Saren crystal shards, vile remains. But amid the ruin, stars seemed just a little brighter. The war did not end in a single explosion. It ended in silence, the kind that follows when the guns have stopped and the void itself seems to listen. For days after the fall of the Harbinger, fragments of the Dominion fleet drifted across Carthion's orbit like ash in wind. Some ships had fled deeper into the veiled rim. Others had simply gone dark. What remained of the veiled Dominion was leaderless, fractured, and afraid. The Allied fleet lingered above the burning planet, battered, silent, and half-ruined. The once bright banners of humanity in the Saren now hung dim with smoke. But they had survived. In the medical ward of the Solstice II, Admiral Rian Holt awoke to the soft hum of machinery. His body was wrapped in biomesh, his arm encased in exosplint. For a moment, he couldn't remember where he was. Then the memories came rushing back. The fight with Valen, the detonator, the light. He tried to sit up. Pain shot through his ribs. "Easy, Admiral." Commander Vashti's voice was calm, but her eyes were red from exhaustion. She had barely slept since the explosion. "How long?" Holt asked. 3 days, she said. "We thought you weren't coming back." He gave a weak smile. "I've been told I'm hard to kill." She chuckled softly, then her expression turned somber. "The Saren fleet sent word. Karun's apprentice, Elora. She didn't make it." Holt closed his eyes. The image of the crystalline warrior, defiant and burning with light, filled his mind. "She saved me," he murmured. "They all did." Vashti nodded. "The Saren have begun recovery operations. They've lost thousands, so have we, but the Dominion fleets are scattering. Without Valen, they're fighting each other for control." Holt sighed, staring at the ceiling. "It's over then, or as close as it ever gets." On the Saren homeworld of Elinar, the sky shimmered with auroras, morning lights. Entire mountains had been carved into memorials, crystalline pillars engraved with names in both Saren glyphs and human letters. For the first time in their long history, the Saren sang not just for their own dead, but for humanity's as well. Elder Karun's name glowed brightest among them. The memorial ceremony was broadcast across both civilizations. Holt stood before the gathered crowd, Saren and human alike. The wind carried the faint hum of the Saren's harmonic chants, a sound that resonated in bone and memory. His uniform was still torn from the battle. He refused to have it repaired. He stepped forward to speak, his voice rough but steady. "When we first met the Saren, humanity didn't know what we were walking into. We just learned to cross the stars, and suddenly, we were looking into the eyes of a species older than our history. Some of us were afraid. Some wanted to fight. But Karun, He saw something in us, something worth standing beside. He paused, scanning the crowd, a sea of crystal and flesh. When the Dominion came for us, we stood together, not because we were the same, but because we refused to let fear define us, and now, because of that choice, we're still here, both of us. He looked up at the pillars of light. The fallen, human, Seren, even those Vael who chose peace, they bought us this moment. Let's not waste it. The audience remained silent for a heartbeat. Then the Seren began to hum their morning chord, a deep resonance that filled the air with shimmering light. Humans bowed their heads. In that shared silence, something sacred passed between the two species, a bond not of convenience, but of shared blood and sacrifice. Weeks later, the first Covenant assembly was convened in orbit above Alinar. The newly built space station shimmered in both human steel and Seren crystal, a physical symbol of their unity. Delegates from Earth, Luna, Mars, and the Seren colonies gathered in a vast chamber surrounded by transparent panels showing the swirling planet. Below, Admiral Holt, still recovering but upright, stood beside Seren Representative High Matriarch Ayalara, a council leader chosen after Karun's passing. Ayalara's voice carried like music. For millennia, the Ealthar have known only division. Today we seal that wound. The Dominion's remnants will be hunted not with vengeance but with purpose, to rebuild what was lost. Holt added, "Humanity stands with the Seren. Together we'll guard these stars, not as conquerors but as keepers of what we almost destroyed." The assembly voted. The motion passed unanimously. The Covenant of Elinar was born, a charter that would define interstellar law for generations. No world would be forced to kneel, no species enslaved, and no alliance built on blood would stand unchallenged. But peace, as always, was fragile. Reports began to surface, Dominion survivors hiding in the Veiled Rim, regrouping under new warlords. Ghost transmissions whispered of Project Rebirth, an attempt to revive Valen's consciousness using fragments of her living armor. Holt read the report in silence, sitting alone in his quarters aboard the Solstice II. The ship was being refitted for patrol duty, part of the new Covenant fleet. Outside his window, the stars drifted by, endless and indifferent. Vashti entered quietly. "You're thinking about the war again." He smirked faintly. "I'm thinking about what comes after it. We always think the end of one war means peace. It just means the next one hasn't started yet." She sat across from him. "Then we'll be ready for it. We've got the Saren now and they've got us." He nodded slowly. "Yeah, they do." They sat in silence for a while, watching the blue light of Elinar fade behind them. On the Saren world, in a quiet chamber carved into the mountain of lights, a single crystal shard rested atop a pedestal. It pulsed faintly, resonating with the echoes of a voice long gone, Elder Karuan's final harmonic signature, preserved in memory. Alara often came there to listen. On this day, the shard glowed brighter for a brief moment, as if responding to something distant, perhaps a passing ship, perhaps a familiar spirit. The hum that followed was soft, almost like a whisper. Light must never bow to shadow. And so the stars entered a new age, the age of the Covenant. Humanity and the Saren rebuilt the worlds that had burned, shared science and art, and forged a peace born of shared scars. Children of both species grew up learning each other's languages. Mixed crews patrolled the void, but in the depths of uncharted space, where broken Dominion ships still drifted, green light flickered faintly, waiting, patient, remembering. Time softened the scars of war, but it never erased them. Across the stars, humanity and the Saren learned to build, not just ships or cities, but trust. The Covenant of Elinar had endured longer than any alliance in recorded history. It had grown from a pact of survival into a federation of light. Human children studied under Saren mentors. Saren artists painted with human pigments for the first time in millennia. Together, they had transformed the ruins of old battlefields into gardens of crystal and steel, living memorials to the fallen. Yet, amid the beauty, history whispered its warnings. On the Saren archive world of Faltor, deep beneath mountains of silver, a human archaeologist brushed dust from an ancient console. It was part of a recovered Veil wreckage, sealed for decades under treaty restriction. When she powered it on, the console pulsed faintly, a green light flickering like an eye opening after long sleep. The last transmission of Warlord Valen played back in fragments. The shadow never dies, it only learns to wait. Then the console went dark. Admiral Rian Holt was long gone, his name etched in gold across the pillars of Elinar. But his legacy lived on through the fleet he helped build, the Covenant Guard. His protege, Captain Leona Terran, granddaughter of the legendary Mara Terran, now commanded the Solstice III, a new generation of starship forged from both human and Saren technology. She had grown up on stories of the Covenant War, of Karun, Holt, and the Saren who had bled for peace. But stories, she had learned, were both shields and burdens. They told her who she was, and reminded her what she had to live up to. On the morning of the anniversary of Vega Prime, she stood on the bridge of her ship, gazing out at the quiet beauty of the Harmony Belt, where dozens of Covenant worlds shone in formation. "Signal from the Council, Captain," her communications officer said. "They've approved the new exploration mandate. We're to chart beyond the Veiled Rim." Leona's brow furrowed. "Beyond Dominion space?" "Yes, ma'am, the sectors haven't been entered since the war. The Saren call it the Silent Reach." She stared into the star map, a dark region beyond the known systems, marked only by faint echoes of collapsed warp gates and lost probes. Something in that void stirred old instincts. "Set course," she said quietly. "Let's see what waits in the dark." The Solstice III slipped through the edge of known space, its engines humming in perfect silence. Saren officers worked alongside humans, their hands moving with graceful precision over hybrid consoles of light and steel. Outside, the stars grew sparse. The sensors picked up debris, remnants of ancient Veil structures, their geometry warped and unnatural. "Captain," said her Saren first officer Theris, his crystalline form glimmering with faint violet light. "These readings, they suggest biomechanical residue. The Dominion's creations were not just engineered, they were alive." Leona's jaw tightened. "You're saying the Harbinger wasn't unique?" "Perhaps not," he replied softly. "Perhaps it was only the first." Moments later, the ship's sensors flared red. "Contact!" shouted the tactical officer. "Unknown vessel emerging from the Reach." On the main display, the void rippled, and something vast began to take shape. It was not like any Dominion ship ever recorded. Its surface was smooth like obsidian glass, but it pulsed with a sickly green core, organic, breathing. "Life signs?" Leona demanded. "Reading multiple," said Theris. "But they're interlinked, not separate entities. It's like the ship itself is alive." The crew watched in silence as the monstrous craft turned slowly, a beam of light scanning the Solstice III. Then a signal cut through the comms. A voice, fractured and layered, speaking in ancient Veil tongue. Theris translated softly, his tone shaken. It says, "We are the Dominion reborn. We remember the fire. We remember the betrayal." A chill ran through the bridge. Leona straightened, eyes hard. "Bring weapons online. Broadcast across all channels. This is Captain Leona Terran of the Covenant Guard. You are entering sovereign space. Identify yourself or we will open fire." The voice replied, deeper this time, filled with static. "Fire, child of ashes. Let us see if your light still burns." The alien vessel's hull split open like a wound, and beams of green plasma erupted toward them. "Evasive!" Leona shouted. The Solstice III rolled hard, its shields flaring blue as energy slammed into them. "Return fire!" Particle cannons roared, missiles streaked through the dark. The enemy ship shuddered but did not break. Its hull simply absorbed the energy, glowing brighter. "Captain, it's feeding on our attacks." Leona's mind raced. "Theris, any Saren harmonic frequencies that could disrupt it?" The Saren closed his eyes, tuning into the resonance field. Its energy signature, it echoes the old Harbinger core. It remembers Karun's harmonic wave. Leona nodded sharply. "Then we'll remind it." She turned to her crew. "Divert power to the resonance amplifiers. Match Karun's last transmission frequency. Light must never bow to shadow. The Saren nodded, voice steady as he began to hum, a deep resonant tone that filled the bridge. One by one, every Saren aboard joined in. The ship's systems resonated with the frequency, amplifying it until the hull itself seemed to sing. Outside, a shockwave of light erupted from the Solstice 3. The alien vessel screamed, its structure cracking, green light flaring wildly. "Now!" Leona shouted. "All weapons fire!" Every cannon, every railgun, every harmonic emitter unleashed at once. The enemy ship convulsed, then tore apart in a silent explosion of emerald fire that faded slowly into darkness. The bridge fell quiet. Theris turned to Leona, eyes glowing faintly. "Karun's words still protect us." Leona smiled faintly. "No, we protect them by remembering." Later, as the ship drifted in orbit of a shattered moon, Leona stood before the viewport. The stars stretched endlessly, distant and watching. In her reflection, she saw both human steel and Saren light, two halves of something greater. She spoke softly, almost to herself. "Admiral Holt, Elder Karun, wherever you are, we're still here, we kept the covenant." Theris joined her, hands clasped behind his back. "And yet the shadow still lingers." "It always will," Leona said. "But as long as there's one voice left to say no, it'll never win." Far away, in the cold ruins of Dominion space, a fragment of the destroyed vessel drifted through the void. Within its shattered core, a spark of green light pulsed once, faint but alive. The shadow never dies. The light dimmed, then faded completely. And in the infinite silence that followed, the stars went on shining, indifferent, eternal, bearing witness to the fragile, fierce species that refused to bow. Humanity. Saren, two voices joined across the endless dark. And their song, the Covenant of Ashes, carried on through the centuries.